At my husband's sister's wedding party that I paid for, I found a group text thread projected on the wall, titled Freeloader Wife. His brother read aloud, "She thinks paying means she belongs." I tried to laugh. Minutes later, the DJ played Gold Digger and everyone cheered. My name is Laura Mendoza. I'm 34 now. And this isn't a breakup story. This is a wake-up call, the kind that slams into your chest like a freight train when you least expect it. If you've ever thought love was enough to earn you a place in someone's family, let me tell you about the night I stopped believing that. I met Mark Whitaker when I was still grinding. I had just opened my real estate business in San Antonio, fresh off a hard breakup and deep into 80-hour work weeks. I was building something for myself. Mark? He was soft-spoken, kind. An engineer with a calm energy I didn't know I needed. He loved that I was ambitious, or at least he said he did. He came from what I'd call a tight-knit family, his mom Ingrid, older brother Mason, and his sister Bryn. They were close in the way that meant group vacations and inside jokes you weren't in on. The kind of family where being an outsider was a permanent condition unless you were born into it. From the start, there were cracks I chose not to see. Subtle digs from Ingrid about how I worked too much. Mason making smug little comments like, "Mark, you sure you're not her assistant," during dinner. Bryn would give me backhanded compliments. My favorite was, "Wow, Laura, I didn't think someone like you would know wine pairings." Someone like me. I ignored it. Because love, right? You push through it. You build bridges. Or so I thought. The thing about marrying into a close family? You better pray they have room for one more. Because if they don't, you'll be building that bridge all alone. We got married 2 years into dating. Small ceremony, pretty backyard wedding in the hill country. I paid for most of it. Mark had loans, and I had a business that was finally thriving. I didn't mind. I thought we were a team. He was always saying, "We'll get where we want to be, together." That together used to mean something. Then came Bryn's engagement. Her fiancé, Dean, seemed nice enough. Lawyer, charming, but clearly had a bit of a spending problem. A few months before the wedding, we heard through the grapevine that Dean was being sued for mismanaging a client's estate. It was ugly. He lost his job. Suddenly, they couldn't pay for the wedding they had already booked. Cue the family emergency group chat. Next thing I know, Mark's asking me if we can help. Not chip in, cover it. We can afford it, he said. It would mean a lot to Bryn. I won't lie, I hesitated. It was a lot. $42,000 wasn't pocket change. But he looked at me like this was our chance to prove something to the family. Like maybe they'd finally accept me if I did this. I said yes. It was supposed to be a gift. A gesture of goodwill. I thought maybe this time, they'd let me in. Spoiler, they didn't. I didn't even notice it happening at first. The little ways they cut me out. Bryn planned the bridal shower without even asking for my availability. I was too busy with work anyway, she said. I shrugged it off. Then the bachelorette party happened in New Orleans. I wasn't invited. When I asked, Bryn smiled and said, "Oh, we figured it'd be more fun to keep it just the girls." As if I wasn't one. Then there was the planning group chat I was mysteriously removed from. I asked Mark about it, and he just said, "They're probably keeping it simple. Don't take it personally." I started feeling like a walking wallet. They let me pay, but not participate. But still. I didn't want to make drama. I smiled. I picked out flower arrangements. I helped choose the venue. I wrote checks like I was investing in something that would eventually pay off. Maybe it would. Maybe this family would see I really cared. That night in Austin, at the Allen house, was supposed to be the culmination of all of that effort. The ceremony went fine. Beautiful, even. The oak trees had twinkle lights wrapped around their trunks, and the whole courtyard looked like something out of a movie. Bryn looked stunning, I'll give her that. Mark looked sharp in a navy suit, and I wore a hunter green silk gown that made me feel powerful, despite the chill I couldn't shake. Then came the reception. Around 9 p.m., the DJ made an announcement. Before we get to speeches, we've got a little surprise. People laughed, drinks in hand, gathering around the back patio where a big white sheet had been hung up between two trees. A projector flickered to life. I thought it'd be a slideshow. Childhood photos. Maybe a video of Dean proposing. What popped up instead made my stomach drop. A group text thread. The title read, "Freeloader Wife." It was a group chat between Bryn, Mason, Ingrid, and Mark. I didn't even get a second to absorb it before Mason, drunk and grinning, stepped up to the mic. "Let's kick off the speeches with a little roast," he said. The first message, "She thinks paying means she belongs." Laughter. Then another, "At least she bought her way into the photos. That's gotta count for something." Then, "She acts like she's part of this family. LOL. Then came Mark's message. His actual words. I saw his name next to it. I read it even before Mason spoke it out loud. "It's easier to let her think she's helping than deal with the drama. Just say thanks and smile." I swear the ground shifted beneath me. People looked around, unsure if it was a joke. A few laughed. Some looked uncomfortable. I turned to Mark. He was frozen. Like a kid caught stealing. Then, the DJ, clearly in on the joke, hit play on Gold Digger. People hooped. Danced. Cheered. I stood there in my green silk dress, my hands clenched at my sides, trying not to cry. Trying not to scream. Trying to figure out how I was the punchline at a wedding I paid for. And then I walked away. Silently. Through the side gate. I found myself behind the kitchen, where I called a car and waited. That's where Mark found me 10 minutes later. And that's where I asked him, "So you all knew?" He didn't deny it. That moment, it wasn't just betrayal. It was clarity. The kind that shakes you loose from the lies you'd been telling yourself for years. I didn't cry until I got back to our hotel. Even then, the tears didn't last long. Because something in me had already shut off. Back at the hotel, I didn't sleep. I sat in that wide, white bed in silence, still in my gown, staring at the glow of the city through the window. My phone buzzed nonstop, messages from guests, a few half-hearted apologies from distant relatives, and one from Mason that just said, "It was just a joke. Chill." The thread of that night unraveled in my mind like an old sweater. Pull one string, and suddenly the whole thing comes apart. Every moment, every joke, every strange silence from the last few years started making sense. This wasn't new. This had been building. At 4:17 a.m., Mark returned. I could smell the alcohol on him the second he walked through the door. He looked at me like I was some stranger who had accidentally broken into his life. "You left early," he said quietly. I didn't answer. He sat down on the other side of the room. Not on the bed. On the armchair, like he didn't even want to come close. "I didn't know Mason was gonna read those texts," he added. "But you wrote them," I said. He looked down. "I didn't mean them like that." "Then how did you mean them?" I asked. "Explain it to me. What exactly did I misinterpret?" He had no answer. Only excuses. Only silence. He never apologized. Not really. He kept trying to justify it with this defeated tone, like he was the victim. "You know how they are," he said. I was trying to keep the peace. The peace. Apparently, humiliating your wife publicly was his version of keeping the peace. I didn't say much after that. I just packed. Quietly, slowly. I had left the wedding early, but now I was leaving something bigger. Something deeper. That night, I checked into a different hotel. One where I could finally breathe. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. The phone didn't ring much, and when it did, it was always from someone wanting to explain or clarify what had happened. But not one of them said the words "I'm sorry." Ingrid called once. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail that started with, "I think this whole thing has been blown out of proportion," and ended with her telling me I should come back and be part of the family again. As if I had ever truly been part of it to begin with. Mark sent one long email. Not even a phone call. Just this rambling message that walked the line between apology and blame, saying things like, "You've always been too sensitive about my family," and "We were under stress, and Mason's sense of humor goes too far sometimes." I read it twice. Closed it. Never responded. What hit me hardest wasn't the betrayal itself, though that stung deep. It was the fact that I'd spent years trying to earn the approval of people who thought I was disposable. Who smiled in my face and laughed behind my back. People who only saw my value in what I could give them, and then mocked me for giving it. What they didn't know, though, what Mark had forgotten, is that I'm not just someone's wife. I'm a businesswoman. And I know exactly how to document things. The first thing I did was pull every receipt. Every check I'd written, every contract I'd signed, every vendor I'd coordinated. I compiled them all into a formal invoice for $42,118.47. I sent it to Bryn. She didn't respond. 2 days later, I sent a second one. This time with interest. Then I forwarded it to collections. I didn't care if I got the money back. It wasn't about the dollars, it was about the principle. They had called me a freeloader. Let them choke on the irony. I also called a lawyer. Our prenup was clear, and thankfully ironclad. My business was mine. The house, also mine. Mark had nothing to fight over, not really. I didn't even want to drag it out in court. I just wanted out. My lawyer sent the divorce filing to his apartment 2 weeks after the wedding. He never tried to fight it. Not once. I think he knew. Around this time, people started talking. Some friends in San Antonio who had been at the wedding texted me things like, "I had no idea what was going on, I'm so sorry," or "That was messed up, Lara. You deserved better." A few people tried to explain it away, say it was just family teasing, or that it got taken out of context. But that's the thing about context. When someone shows you who they are, really shows you, you don't need more of it. You just need to believe them. Still, some part of me struggled with it. Not the decision to leave, I was long gone emotionally, but the reality of how much I'd lost trying to gain the approval of people who never wanted to accept me. It was like trying to buy love from a vending machine that just ate your money and flashed out of order in your face. For a few weeks, I felt hollow. I kept going to work, showing houses, smiling through the routine. But inside, I was unraveling. Not sad. Just worn out. Like I had spent all my emotional currency on people who saw me as nothing more than a credit card. And then one morning, I woke up. Made myself coffee. Sat by the window overlooking downtown. And realized, I was free. Not just from Mark. Not just from Ingrid or Bryn or Mason. I was free from the exhausting weight of trying to belong somewhere I was never meant to be. Then something interesting happened. I got a call from a wedding photographer I'd hired for Bryn's wedding. She said, "Hey, I know this is weird, but I think you should know, they told me to crop you out of most of the reception photos." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Did you?" I asked. "No," she said. "I kept the originals. Want me to send them to you?" "Sure," I said. "Why not?" A few days later, she sent over a link. And there I was, dancing, smiling, greeting guests. In every shot, I looked like the happiest person in the world. I looked like someone who belonged. The irony wasn't lost on me. Because those pictures? They were just as fake as the smiles in them. The photos from the wedding sat in a Google Drive folder titled Whitaker Wedding Raw. I didn't open them for a while after the photographer sent them. I wasn't ready to see myself in those moments, before the truth hit me, before the room shifted, before my world turned inside out. But eventually, curiosity won. One night, around midnight, I poured a glass of Cabernet, sat on my couch with my laptop, and opened the folder. There I was. Dancing with Mark under the oak trees, the lights wrapping around us like fairy tale vines. Laughing with guests I didn't know were laughing at me behind my back. Cutting a piece of cake with Bryn, who was smiling wide with her arm looped through mine, eyes already gleaming with the next sarcastic jab she'd send to the group chat. It felt like watching a ghost. Not because I looked dead inside, but because I looked so alive. So convinced I was part of something. And now, I knew better. I went through every photo, each one a gut punch in a different direction. But the one that stayed with me the longest was a candid shot the photographer had taken near the bar. I was mid-laugh, head tilted back slightly, hand on a wine glass. You could see Mason in the background, leaning over to whisper something in Mark's ear. And Mark, he was smiling. Not at me. At whatever Mason said. That photo was the one that broke whatever was left. I downloaded it. Printed it. Not to keep. But to remind myself. I folded it once and tucked it into the back of my desk drawer. Sometimes the people who smile the biggest in public are the same ones who cut the deepest in private. I didn't go fully no contact with Mark right away. At first, it was the legal stuff. Signing documents, clearing the house, dealing with accounts. It was cold, civil, transactional. Then came the emotional reach-outs. Text messages at 2 a.m. I miss you. Can we talk? I messed up. I didn't reply. He tried calling a few times. I let it ring. The last voicemail he left said, I think about you every day. I don't know how to fix this, but I'd do anything to try. The problem was, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't looking for an apology. I was just done. Done begging for respect. Done explaining why I was hurt. Done trying to convince someone that I deserved basic loyalty. Letting go wasn't hard once I realized I was the only one holding on to begin with. About a month after the divorce was filed, I got a call from Bryn. I nearly didn't answer. But something in me wanted to hear what she had to say. She didn't even start with hi. She started with, are you happy now? I stayed quiet. She went on. You sent us to collections over a wedding. Seriously? You really needed to make it that dramatic? I sent you a bill, I said calmly. I paid for your entire wedding. That wasn't a gift. That was a favor. And I was publicly humiliated at the event I funded. So yes, I'm following through. She scoffed. It was just jokes. You took everything way too personally. I paused. Then asked, would it still be a joke if it were your name on that screen? If Dean's family called you a freeloader? Silence. And then, you're just bitter. Click. I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to her. Mason sent me a DM on Instagram a week later. A single sentence, you should learn how to take a joke. No punctuation. I blocked him. Ingrid never reached out again, which honestly was a blessing. Her absence was the closest thing to peace that woman ever offered me. Mark tried one more time. He sent a letter. A handwritten one. In it, he said he was embarrassed, that he regretted being complicit, and that he'd lost sight of what mattered. He said he wanted to fix things, to start over, to rebuild. He signed it, love always, Mark. I tore it in half and dropped it in the shredder. Some things don't get to be rebuilt. Not when they were designed to collapse from the beginning. In the months that followed, I poured myself into my business. I hired 2 new agents, revamped my brand, and started taking on mentorship clients. Young women from underserved communities, first-gen business owners, women like me, tired of proving themselves in rooms that were never meant to include them. One of my ments, Kayla, asked me during a workshop, how do you bounce back from betrayal like that? I looked at her for a long second. Then I said, "You stop bouncing. You plant. You root. You grow. You don't go back to who you were. You become someone they can't reach anymore." And that was the truth of it. I wasn't the woman Mark married anymore. I wasn't the woman who walked into that wedding thinking love was enough. I was someone else now. Someone sharper. Quieter. But stronger. A few weeks ago, I was at the H-E-B off Blanco Road, grabbing groceries before a late showing. I was in leggings and a baseball cap, thinking about dinner, when I heard a voice behind me. "Lara?" I turned. It was Dean. Bryn's husband. He looked thinner. Tired. His eyes had that hollow look of someone who'd had a few too many sleepless nights. He offered a sheepish smile. "Hey. I don't know if you want to talk, but I just wanted to say I was sorry. For everything that happened. You didn't deserve that." I just nodded. He stood there a moment longer. "Bryn still says you overreacted. But I don't." "You were right. I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I didn't need his validation. Let them talk. Let them spin their version of the story at every family gathering for the next 20 years. I had my truth. And I was finally free from the lie of theirs." After that grocery store run-in with Dean, I found myself thinking more about closure. Not the romantic kind. Not even the family kind. But the kind you give yourself, silently, when no one offers it to you. That night, I went home, poured a glass of tea instead of wine, and started cleaning out a file cabinet in my office. I wasn't really looking for anything, just wanted to declutter. But in the back of one folder, tucked between old receipts and contracts, I found a letter I had written to myself years earlier. I had forgotten all about it. It was something I did after closing my first real estate deal. A letter to future Lara, filled with the hope and fire and blind faith only someone early in their journey could possess. I read it slowly. "You're going to face people who try to shrink you. Don't let them. You've worked too hard to let someone else tell you what you're worth." I sat there for a long time, staring at that last line. Because that was the wound, wasn't it? Not just that they mocked me. But that for a moment, just long enough, I believed them. That I wasn't enough without their approval. That my value depended on how well I played their game. I folded the letter and taped it to the inside of my office drawer. Right beside the printed wedding photo, the one where Mark's laughing at a joke I'll never hear. Let them laugh. I had outgrown that room anyway. A month after the divorce was finalized, I sold the house in Hill Country. I didn't even walk through it one last time. Just signed the papers, collected the check, and drove off without a backward glance. I bought a condo in Austin, high up in a building that overlooked Lady Bird Lake. Clean walls, tall windows, no ghosts. It wasn't just a new space, it was the absence of the old. No shared furniture. No joint account statements. No soft reminders of what I used to bend myself into. I changed my number. Got a new email. Scrubbed my online presence of anything tying me to Whitaker. It was almost embarrassing how freeing that felt. Like cutting a thread that had been wrapped around my ribs for years. Then, out of nowhere, came a message. Not from Mark. From his cousin, Camille. She sent it through LinkedIn of all places. The message started off polite, "Hope you're doing well," and then slipped into something strange. Apparently, Ingrid had been diagnosed with something, nothing life-threatening, but enough to get the family scrambling. And Mark, for reasons I couldn't understand, had been not himself since the divorce. He'd stopped attending family dinners. Stopped talking to Mason. There was talk of him even considering therapy, which for that family was practically a foreign language. Camille said, "I think you meant more to him than he could handle. And now he's realizing what he lost." I didn't know what to do with that. It felt too late. And not in a dramatic way, Just in that quiet, factual way where a door's been closed so long it no longer even shows where the frame used to be. I never responded. Closure doesn't always require a conversation. Sometimes, it's just a decision. But life has a funny way of testing your boundaries. A few weeks later, I was at a real estate networking event in Austin. Casual rooftop gathering, nothing fancy. I was standing by the charcuterie table, chatting with a young broker about a zoning deal, when I heard someone laugh behind me. That voice. Mark. I froze, spine straightening like it had been yanked by a string. He was across the patio, holding a drink, talking to some guy in finance. He hadn't seen me yet. I stood there, watching him from behind a pair of sunglasses, heart pounding in that detached, clinical way. Not like seeing an old flame, but like seeing an old version of yourself. He looked thinner. A little tired. His posture still perfect, the way engineers always stand like they're still bracing for a building inspection. But there was something dull about his face. Something empty. And for the first time I didn't feel anger. Or pain. Or betrayal. I just felt nothing. Complete, hollow nothing. I turned away before he saw me. Walked across the rooftop, tossed my half-eaten fig into a napkin, and left. No drama. No confrontation. Just distance. The kind that says, you don't get access to me anymore. A week later, one of my agents sent me a link to a Facebook post from Bryn. Apparently, she and Dean were having marital issues. There were vague, passive-aggressive quotes posted on her profile. Things like, some people only love you when you're useful. And my personal favorite, a strong woman will only be treated like a doormat for so long before she becomes the door. I nearly choked on my tea. She was quoting herself now. The comments were filled with sympathy. Ingrid had even commented with a prayer emoji. I didn't laugh. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt tired. It's strange. You spend years trying to make people see your worth, trying to be accepted, loved, appreciated, and then when they start to fall apart, when their carefully crafted images begin to crack, it doesn't bring you joy. It just reminds you how much energy you wasted on something that never mattered in the first place. It's not revenge. It's not karma. It's just life catching up. And I was far ahead now. But the echoes of that night, the projector, the group chat, the song, still whispered sometimes. Usually when I was alone, washing dishes, or driving late at night with the radio low. The memory would creep in like a shadow across the windshield. She thinks paying means she belongs. And I'd breathe, in and out, steady. Because now, I know better. Now, I belong only to myself. Time passed. Seasons changed. Business boomed. The wedding debacle became less a fresh wound and more a scar I barely noticed unless I looked closely. I stopped replaying it. I stopped explaining it. Eventually, I even stopped talking about it. That's the quiet revenge, isn't it? When someone betrays you, they expect anger. They feed off drama. They wait for the outburst so they can play victim in return. But when you disappear from their orbit completely, that's what haunts them. And I had vanished from theirs in every way that mattered. But as much as I wanted to move on, I'll admit there was one last itch I hadn't scratched. Not spite. Not even payback. Just the need for truth to have a moment in the sun. About 9 months after the wedding, I got an email from a freelance writer in Houston. She was doing a piece for a mid-sized magazine about financial boundaries in modern families. Apparently, she'd come across one of my ments who mentioned me in a workshop, and the writer thought my story as a successful entrepreneur navigating betrayal might fit the theme. She asked if I'd be open to speaking, anonymously, if I preferred. At first, I hesitated. Then I thought, why not? I told my story. Cleanly. Calmly. No names. No rants. Just facts. How a woman had paid for a family wedding, only to be mocked by the very people she helped. How she reclaimed her autonomy. How she built her life again. The article was titled, "When Support Becomes Exploitation, the Cost of Paying to Belong." It got traction. A lot of traction. It was shared on LinkedIn, Twitter, then Reddit. The comments flooded in. "This is why I keep financial boundaries with family. Good for her for walking away. I think I know which wedding this was." There was one detail that made it unmistakable, the part where a group chat titled "Freeloader Wife" was projected at the reception. That detail alone was enough. And someone, God bless them, posted a screenshot of Bryn's old Facebook story from that night. You could just barely make out the projector screen in the background. It went viral. Not because of me, but because people hate hypocrisy. And that family? They were the poster children for it. A few weeks later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Ingrid. "Why are people tagging me in some ridiculous article? What the hell did you do?" I didn't respond. Then Bryn. "You seriously just told the whole internet about us? You're insane." I still didn't respond. Then Mark. "You really needed to humiliate everyone like that? This is your revenge?" No. That wasn't revenge. That was accountability. But I didn't text that either. I let the silence speak for itself. Within a month, Bryn lost several clients from her small event planning business. Not because I did anything, but because people talk. Clients talk. Vendors talk. And when someone's name becomes synonymous with being two-faced and ungrateful, that travels fast. Mason, according to someone I knew at his firm, was passed up for a promotion after his name was attached to the article in a Reddit thread. His behavior at the wedding was brought up in his evaluation as a concern about professionalism. Even Dean reached out. He messaged me, respectfully, just to say, "I'm sorry for how they treated you. I should have spoken up. You didn't deserve that." I didn't reply. But I appreciated it. Mark didn't lose his job or fall into ruin. That wasn't the goal. But the last I heard, he was alone. Still living in the same apartment. Still avoiding family dinners. Still sitting in the silence he helped create. And me? I published a book. Real Estate. Real Power. Half industry manual, half memoir. The final chapter was titled, "The Night I Bought My Way Out." It became a quiet bestseller in women's entrepreneurship circles. Book clubs discussed it. Podcasts invited me on. I never once named names. I never had to. The people who knew, knew. And the people who didn't? They just saw a woman who rose from betrayal with more fire than bitterness. Last month, I got married again. It wasn't a wedding, really, just a small ceremony on a rooftop in Marfa, overlooking the desert at sunset. No bridesmaids. No DJ. No family speeches. Just me, the man I love, and the people who chose to show up, not out of obligation, but out of respect. We paid for it together. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. And there wasn't a projector in sight. Just stars. And silence. The good kind this time. The kind you earn when you walk away with dignity, and leave the ashes behind for the wind to deal with.